What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about Fortnite's recent nerf to the Shuri Claws and what I recommend carrying in that slot. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below what you think of this change and what you're going to be carrying. So, if you guys were unaware, with this week's update, you can no longer use the hover jets to reset the dash on the Shuri Claws. Basically, the way this item is supposed to function is you can do one dash, and then you can't do another dash attack with the claws until you hit the ground. But prior to this week's update, you could use the War Machine hover jet to basically reset that and then do another dash. And this was incredibly good for traveling around the map really quickly, but also getting away from like the Iron Man item or just any situation where you're kind of running low on jetpack fuel or close to running out of jetpack fuel. You could use the claws to get distance while not using much jetpack fuel. And so I feel like this change impacted the game a lot for me, being someone who highly recommend using these claws. So if you are someone who watched those videos, you're potentially, impacted by this change. With the recent nerfs to the hover jet's fuel, having the double mobility was nice for like I said, when you do run out of fuel, or just for like avoiding running out of fuel, since you're using the claws as movement as well. And that's the first point, I think, is that kind of just like, regardless of which item you take as a replacement, I feel like without being able to use these items together, you have to be really mindful of third parties in any fight where you use your hover jets a lot. Like if you use 75% of your fuel from your jetpack in a fight, you're making yourself very vulnerable to third parties, and you're probably not going to be able to reset things. Whereas like when claws were in the game, when claws worked well with the jetpack, 25% fuel is fine. You just, claw, barely tap it, use barely any fuel, and then just like rinse and repeat, and you're out of there. So be mindful of your jetpack fuel. Anytime you use too much of it, you're making yourself a target. Try to at least have some out if you are going to use a lot of fuel, and just potentially try to use less of the fuel in a fight to kind of avoid those situations. As far as what you should run in that slot, or what I would recommend running in place of the Shuri Claws, I think it's going to come down to either shield bubbles or shockwave grenades. You could still just use the claws. They're still pretty good, and they're definitely useful. They're just not as fluid to use as they were before with the jetpack, and I don't think they're like great anymore. Like they're good, they're not great. And so I think there's other things I'd rather have. The Iron Man boots are also something a lot of people will bring up, but I really do not think highly of this item at all. And if you're in a situation where somebody's shooting you with the Iron Man gauntlets, trying to use the Iron Man boots isn't going to allow you to get out of there, because they're just going to hit you, and then you're going to be like stuck in that weird animation, and you're going to go nowhere. Just a mobility item that is impacted by your opponents hitting you at all, in a season where there's just a lock-on item kind of running the game right now, like that's just not going to go well for you. The shield bubbles don't allow you to just like hard reset a fight versus the Iron Man user in the way that the Shuri Claws would in combination with the jetpack, but you can like protect yourself, take less damage, and then look to turn the fight. It is not just an automatic win in the fight, though. Whenever I've talked about shield bubbles to counter certain items, I read comments, and it gives me the impression that people think they just throw the bubble and then their problems are gone. That is not how it goes. Like, you're still going to have to do things. You're still going to have to make decisions. You're still going to have to outplay the scenario. The shield bubble just gives you more kind of options in the fight. It gives you a little bit of time to maybe think and just take less damage, because like the Iron Man item, just like people just want to be around you and spray down with it, and when you throw the shield bubble, they're either going to try to drop on you or they're going to use the uni beam, and I think both of these situations are better than just getting blasted by somebody using the Iron Man. If they do try to drop on you, you can then shotgun fight them around the bubble, which in my opinion is a much better fight than them just being above you shooting down, And then they may also go for the uni beam, and the uni beam can actually hit through the shield bubble. But the thing about the uni beam is it has like an animation and like a ramp up time. So if you see them going for that, you can kind of jetpack up and out of your bubble or to the side, and then get shots on them while they're in this animation. Hopefully you've dodged it since you used your jetpack, and you can like boost to the side right before they get it off. And then you can either use that damage you got on them to like push and get the hit kill, or if you're weaker yourself, maybe you just use the fact that you did damage to them and now they want to leave to also kind of retreat and both of y'all just like reset the fight and heal. Like I think both of those outcomes are probably better than just, you know, eventually getting eliminated to them killing you with like the base attack that just locks on, you know? The bubbles can also be really helpful if you do get caught in a situation with no or like low fuel, because you can use them to protect yourself and buy some time and maybe allow, you know, some time for your fuel to regenerate, or you kind of like bubble, wait a bit, jetpack a bit, bubble again. Like you can use multiple bubbles in a fight and like spread them out to the point where like eventually you get a situation where like you able to heal, your jetpack fuels back, or you're able to get some amount of damage on the person pursuing you, like whatever is going on there. There's also a lot of situation where bubbles are great that really don't have anything to do with the Iron Man item or running out of fuel. But since this video is mostly about the Shuri Claw nerf, that's what I'm trying to talk about. I'm trying to talk about like the situations that that item previously solved where now you may have to use another item for it. But the bubbles are really good. And if you're someone who's good at playing off of bubbles, you can force people to play your game. Like I talked about with like the Iron Man user is probably going to drop on you if they like feel confident. And now you're fighting them in a bubble. And if you're used to playing those fights and if you're good at playing those fights, it's an advantage for you. Especially, you know, if that Iron Man user isn't the most confident close range fighter or the most like experienced in those situations, you just make the fight something different, you know? Shockwaves are also going to be a decent replacement for the claws just because they've always been a great, just like, you know, get out of here mobility item. You throw it and then you're far away. The reason why I liked the claws more earlier in the season is because they were unlimited. You didn't need to worry about finding a bunch of them. You find one and you're good to go, you know? And then they also worked really well with the jetpack, but the claws no longer work really well with the jetpack. You do need to be careful when shockwaving that you don't accidentally jetpack out of the shockwave's range. This is something that I do a decent amount, but I'm not really that used to running shockwaves and the jetpack together. I feel like as I use these items more, that would be less of a problem that I have, you know? But that is something you need to be mindful of. You also do need to be mindful of how many you have, because you have to find more each time you use them. You know, it's a limited resource. It's a consumable. So if I was to carry them, I would want to save them for really bad situations, like somebody fighting me with Iron Man, or maybe I'm getting third partied and I just want to reset, and then save my jetpack for just general traveling. The nice thing about the Shuri Claws and jetpack combos, you could just use both of them for general traveling, and you could use both of them for like, I need to get out of here. So it's like, it was just both were good all the time. But shockwaves, I feel like you need to save them for like pivotal moments since they are a consumable, but you definitely can use like a combination of shockwaves and a jetpack to reset fights versus the Iron Man users, or just get out of a bad situation if you do run out of fuel, hopefully. Because the lock-on range of the Iron Man gloves is 40 meters. So one shockwave used well, you should hopefully be able to get yourself out of that lock-on range and just kind of like stop taking damage, hopefully. You can use more to get further away. But that's like the big thing about dealing with the Iron Man item is you need to get out of that lock-on range to hopefully just stop taking damage. The longer you're in the lock-on range, the more damage you're pretty much guaranteed to take. They can't hit you when they're not locked on, but it's just harder, you know? But if you're in that lock-on range, you're guaranteed to take damage pretty much. So the longer you're within range of being locked on, just naturally, you're eventually going to lose, you know? So like that's kind of like key one is getting out of lock-on range, and shockwaves can definitely help with that. They're just definitely more difficult or inconvenient to use than like the Shuri Claws were when those were the option. And I'm really not sure which I prefer at this point. I feel like I have to play around more and kind of figure it out. Like I said, I do need to get better at using shockwaves when I have a jetpack in my inventory. But I think both can be pretty viable. It just depends on the situation. If you just want to run anytime you see somebody using Iron Man, shockwaves are probably going to be better. But if you are comfortable playing off of bubbles, I think they are very viable. And like I said, if you force people to play bubble fights, you'll catch a lot of people off guard that aren't used to playing like that. And if you've been playing ranked recently with like the recent changes, I feel like bubbles are very good, and you can like see who plays bubble fights well, you know? Also, cars are going to be great. I've talked about cars a bunch for dealing with the Iron Man item, but it again, like I talked about before, with getting out of lock-on range. When you're in the car, you can't be locked onto by the regular attack. So just immediate get out of lock-on range. Maybe you drive away and reset. Maybe they go for the uni beam and you beam them. I think cars are really great. Um, and it's traveling that you can do without having to use your jetpack fuel. So hopefully you end up in less situations where you're out of jetpack fuel, or if your jetpack is low, you can get to your car and then hopefully get away. Your jetpack is charging in the meantime. So I would highly recommend trying to use cars a little bit more if you are someone who ignored them earlier on in the season. I definitely was, but since the Iron Man update, I've been using them more, and I feel like I'm going to be using them even more now with the nerf to the Shuri Claws. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this to be helpful, informative, interesting. Let me know down in the comments below what you're going to be using after this nerf to the Shuri Claws. And if you did like this, give it a like, sub, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.